Okay, welcome back to another episode in this CSS Grid tutorial where I show you how to create a full CSS Grid website based on the CSS Grid specification. So not only are we using it for interior elements, but we're using it as the actual superstructure of the website itself. We have so far, as a recap, we've done the header with the navigation, we've done this hero section, we've completed this feature section, and in the last video we did this call out here. So the next section of our website is going to be this blog type of section. So maybe it's news, or maybe you're pulling in articles from your blog. Either way, there's a kind of a smaller image on the left, and then there's summary text, and then there's a little read more button, and then maybe down here this takes you to a larger blog page that has all of your blog section on it, or maybe it takes you to a news page, but it takes you away. So this is a link to a different page. You can see this is the last real content section before we get to the footer. So let's just dive in. I'm going to open up our project on CodePen. So far we have the header, we have our hero image, we have our 3 across feature section, and then the last thing that we created was this kind of call out section with you can have a background image or no background image, whatever you choose. And then now we're going to jump into the blog section. So let's just go ahead and get rid of this, and we're going to call this the blog. And what we need a few different elements here. First, I'm going to create a blog inner section that's going to cover all of this area here. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to separate ourselves from the greater section here. We did that up here where we separated the text from the greater all the padding that's around it. We're going to do that here too, where we have a section that we're going to call blog, and then inside that we're going to have kind of a block of content that's called blog inner, and that's going to hold all of this. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to center this. Same thing that we did up here in this feature section. We're going to go to maximum width, and then we're going to set the margins on either side to be auto. And that should center it in the viewport for us. We're also going to put a little padding on there, and then inside of that, then we're going to create our grid structure. And so all of this is going to be a grid in and of itself, and then we're also going to have a button here. So let's just get started on writing the code. So we need a blog inner, and we need a blog grid, and then inside the grid we need a few different elements. We need a blog image, we need a blog summary, and then we need a blog button, or a CTA, or whatever we want to call it. So let's just say we have the blog image, we have the blog text. I'm just going to call it blog image and blog text. And what this is going to do is it's going to create and set up kind of a 2-column type of structure. So we're going to have one here, and then the next thing that flows in is this column, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this. Okay, so it's going to help us to set up this type of structure. And then inside of the image, we'll just set an image. Let's choose, yeah, something like this is fine. So we can just take this whole thing actually. We're not going to make a background image, we're going to put an actual image in there. So let's go and do 600 by 300, and then I'm just going to make this like image number 400. I don't know what that is. Okay, there it is. And then inside the text, so this is going to be on the left side, and then we want something on the right side. So that's going to be our blog summary. and then I'll just put a little I'm just going to put a little text. Actually, let's just make that a p tag and then we're going to call blog summary, and then we'll just throw some lorem ipsum text in there, just some filler text. And then after our blog summary, we're going to have a button, so we'll call this we're going to use a link because it's going to go off to a different page. So we're going to say href, and this is going to have a class of button, and we'll just start with button first, and then maybe we can build out a couple of different types of buttons. Haven't done that yet on this website, so I'll show you just kind of my process of going through creating buttons. They're actually quite easy, and one of the reasons people get a framework is so they can easily get something and just add button to it, but it doesn't take very much for you to create your own set of buttons, including ghost buttons or nice rollover effects and things like that. So we're going to call this read more. So that's going to be the text on the button itself. So let's see. So we have our image, we have our summary, and then we're going to have our link that says read more. Okay, so this is going to be our basic setup in the grid. We want to have 3 of those, so let's just copy and paste 3 of those. Okay. There we go, get them all lined up nice and neat. And so now we have an image, we have a summary, and we have a button. Okay, so those are our 3 sections there. We're just going to give each of these a different number so that there'll be different images, and just to be able to separate them from one another. So we have 3 different images. I don't really like that one. Let's try something else. I don't like the white background of that image on a white background, so that's why I'm going to change that. I'm sure whatever shows up will be fine. Yeah, okay. And then the last thing we need to do is lined up with our blog inner, so inside of that but lined up with blog grid is going to sit another button, so not there but there. So it needs to be lined up here with the blog grid, and that's going to be another link. This is going to be our link off to the main blog page or to more stories, right? So we're going to say button. So it's going to be this link is going to be have a class of button. We'll start with that. We're also going to add, we're going to call it ghost button. I know I want to do that, so I'm just going to add that in. So we don't really have a reference for that yet, so we'll just, anytime you add a hashtag in there, it activates it as a link, but all it does is send the user back to the top of the page, essentially, whenever they click it. But it gives you something to work with, an actual link to click, and you can see that's what happens. So we have a class of button, and then we have a class of ghost button, and I'll show you what that is. And so more stories on our blog. I don't know what to put there. That seems like a good thing to add in there to the button. So now we have this link, and then we have these pieces of content that go all together. So that's our HTML structure, and that should get us where we need to go so far. You can see that it's not responsive. Our images are taking up a lot of space whenever it gets too small for the image, so we'll fix that too. And let's just jump into the CSS here. So before I style the blog, I'm going to style the blog inner. And part of that is just for purposes of teaching. Part of it is sometimes it's just easier to start on the inside and move out. You kind of find your way through about where's the easiest place to start adding styles. So I'm just going to start with the blog inner because I know what I want it to do. I want it to be just like this feature section, which you can see stays in the middle, right? Once it gets to that area there, it doesn't keep expanding. It stays in the middle and stays centered. So what we're going to do is just come up and go to our features section, and this features inner, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put it down here. There are ways for me to make that. I could have taken this blog inner right here and combined it with the features inner here. There are ways to make it a little bit more modular and a little bit easier and not as unwieldy, but sometimes it actually is easier to just duplicate elements because it's easier to get to it if they're farther away in the CSS, or it doesn't make a lot of sense because they're not connected. Just trust me on that. So we have a max width of 800, we have a margin of auto, and what that's going to do is it's going to keep it centered, you see. So when it gets to be more than, you can see down here, when it gets to be more than 800 pixels, then it stays. It doesn't continue to follow the left edge over here. Okay, that's exactly what we want. But what we don't want is all this butting up against everything here. That's just looks unprofessional, and it's super easy to just add a little bit of padding. Even just, you know, 1 or 1 rem of padding makes a big difference. And you can see that it gives us a little bit of padding there. And we'll fix some of this, some of these errors here, what I would consider to be errors. So we're just going to put no padding on top, put some padding on the side, and then let's these images are really bothering me, so I'm just going to go ahead and deal with those. Those are called blog image, and what I'm going to do is to say blog image, the width needs to be 100%. So these are going to make these images responsive. And you can see that when they grow all the way to the size that they need to be, but when they get here, they take on the padding over here. They no longer push everything out to the edges, because these are responsive images to the container that it's in. So you have to put that on the image tag itself. I don't believe it'll work very well if you put it on the div. So I always put it on the image tag, and if you want all of your images to be responsive, I would just come up here to the top, and if you have kind of a general section where you have things like paragraph tags or links or heading tags, you know, just kind of your general styles, and you want to put a style for the image to be responsive, you just put IMG with a width of 100%. And that'll make all the images responsive on your website, and then you can override that later if you want. That's part of responsive web design. Okay, so now we need to set up our blog grid, and so much like we did with our main grid, like we did with our grid wrapper here, we're going to set up a grid for all of this content here to sit within. Technically we could add this one in too. I'm just not going to do that. It's one of the things I love about web design is you can take, you know, 10 different routes to do the same thing. So it's what do you know how to do, what are you comfortable doing, what is right for the project. There are a lot of things to think about. For kind of a quick and dirty tutorial like this, you know, just kind of getting there the quickest way that we can, I think is okay. So what I'm going to do is, it makes sense to put it right here, so I'm going to say blog grid, and then display grid. Okay. And I'm going to say grid template columns. If we look, we need to have two columns. So this is going to be one column, and this is going to be the second column. And I've kind of worked this out before. I think 300 pixels would be good for the image size. And then I'm going to just say 1 FR, which is one fraction unit. So essentially, this is going to be 300 pixels wide, and then this is just going to take up whatever is left, which is exactly what we want. So it's going to be real responsive. You see that? Now, when you get to, when you get into this area here, somewhere around, this is iPad size, somewhere around here, we're going to just start changing up the layout a little bit, maybe bring this down, that type of thing. But we'll deal with responsive styles a little bit later. Grid, template, rows. I like to just kind of set to auto if there's nothing else. I want to add some specific space between these two items, and then also a different amount of space between these groups of items. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say grid, row, gap. Actually, let's start with column. Grid, column, gap. I just have preferences, that's all it is. And we're going to say 30 pixels. So on each of these what are they called, gutters. Each of these gutters is 30 pixels, so that's the reason I'm using that. Normally I would say a rim or two rims or three rims, and then that would be based on 16 pixels. So that would be essentially 32 pixels. So it's, for all intents and purposes, it's the same as two rim. But if you're being precise, it's not the same. Grid, row, gap is, I'm just going to say two rim, which is 32 pixels in between. So we see that we have some nice space here, and then a similar amount of space. You could always bump that up to 3 or 4. So depending on kind of how much space you wanted in between. It looks to me like we have quite a bit of space in between them, maybe to where it is right now. But I think because these images are kind of flat, they're more wide in landscape than they are tall, which is a little bit of a deviation from our mostly square layout here. Because of that, a little less space here is probably okay. If these were more square, you'd want more space. So now we have our grid set up. So it looks nice. All of the space as it shrinks down is being pushed internally. It's not being pushed around externally. And so what is next? What's next would be, this always bugs me a little bit, this space here. And you get that whenever you have a P tag. So your P tags have a margin on the top and on the bottom. And what I like to do is just, if I want to square that up to the top, I just get rid of that. So we'll say blog summary. And since that class is directly on the P tag, we don't have to say blog summary P, we can just say blog summary. And then we just say margin top of 0, and it should just shore that right up to the top there, you see. And so we get a nice clean line that comes down and lines up to the top there. So that is nicely done, and now this is very bothersome. Okay, so we need to add some space at the very least to the top of this section, and that's under the ID of blog. And then blog, we're going to give some padding to the top, let's say like 3 rem padding. We don't need anything on the sides really, because see, we got this space right here, but it gives us a nice little lift. Just kind of pulls it away from that section. You could even go as much as, sometimes I go as much as 4 or 5 rem. Oh, that was not the one. Here. I do as much as 4 or 5 sometimes to give it some space and some breathing room. You can see on our mock-up here we have quite a bit of space on the top and the bottom, just a lot of nice white space. Again, this is based on 1530 pixels wide, so you can see that our max width of 800 here leaves quite a bit of breathing room on each side. So that's where we are here with our design. So it's nicely done. You could add some drop shadows, you could add some borders to these. There's some things you can do to kind of pull them off the page a little bit and make it not seem quite so flat and static. I'm not going to worry about that here as a part of this tutorial, but it's something you could certainly look into. So let's focus on these buttons. On the layout, I just have just kind of like a little text for you to click. I think I want to make these into buttons though. So I think I've actually I've added the button class to these different read more anchor tags. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up here kind of to my general styles, and I'm just going to start writing some button styles. What I like is a button. I like to have a normal button. I like to kind of like Bootstrap does, where you have a normal size button, maybe an extra small or an extra large, and then a ghost button, and maybe some sort of alternate or inverse button where you have kind of light on a dark background, that type of thing. So just playing around with different sizes of font and also different types of padding, spaces, you know, between the words and the border, the outside of the button. You can create several different sizes and styles. So let's just start with kind of a general button. So we'll say padding of 0.5 rem and then 1 rem on the sides. So that's 0.5 on the top, 0.5 on the bottom, 1 rem on the sides. And then just so we can see it a little bit better, we'll add a background color, and we'll just match the kind of the color that we've had, which is this dark gray color. And then we'll say color white, and that'll color the text white. And then because this is an anchor link, we can actually get rid of, what can we get rid of? We can get rid of the text decoration. So the underline, I don't really like that for the buttons. I know it's not semantically good and it's not usability wise very good, but when I'm using an anchor link for a button, you know, I don't want it to have the text underline. It's personal preference. If you like it, do it. Otherwise you can say text decoration none, and it'll take the underline off of there. I want to make the font size a little bit smaller because it seems to be encroaching. So we'll start with 0.9. That's pretty good at this point. And then we're going to say display inline block. And then that just gives it a little bit more space, so it treats it like a block level element instead of an inline element, which is nice. You could also go full on display block if you wanted to, and then that sends it all the way across 100%. Okay, so inline block means that it only goes as far as the text inside of it goes. So if you had text out to here, the block would go to here. If it's a full block, then it goes, the default is 100%. So then you'd have to, you know, if you wanted to change the width on that, you'd have to say 75%, or you'd have to change the width in some way for that display block, because you can see even down here that it goes there, but you can see that now it's at 75%. So this is just kind of one extra stop that you need to do. But if you do inline block, then you get a nice button shape. Okay, so a little trick there about the buttons. I want to add a border radius. And what border radius does is it determines how square the corner is. So maybe something like 3 pixels, not very much, just round off the corners just a little bit so they're not quite so sharp. So there's 3 pixels of radius, and then we will come down and start doing the hover styles. So in SAS, when you do this ampersand, then that's basically saying dot button with a pseudo class of hover, right? So it takes this one before, and then essentially is a placeholder for this. Okay, so that's where that comes from. And we're going to say background color of, I learned this somewhere along the way, I don't even know where, but someone was saying how you can use the RGBA alpha channel to create a nice hover effect. And so I've begun to use this myself, and it doesn't work in every single situation, but it works in a lot of them. So I can take our primary color, which is here, and then I can say RGBA 333, and then in the alpha channel we're going to give it a 0. Let's say 8. And what that does is it gives it some sort of color change from this solid color, which is 100%, to 80%. And then you can, let's see if it'll work for us. Is it gonna work? Oh. Starting to lose the website here. Okay, what? Let's do something more drastic. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty drastic, going from 1 to 100% to 50%. That's a little bit too much. So what we want to do is go to like 80%. So you get a nice little hover effect where it turns gray, but it's a shade of the original color. You could also reverse this, where this is the lighter, and then when you roll over it gets darker to like 100%. This is okay. It's okay. This is kind of old school. It's to the point, and there's no sophistication to it. If you want to add some sophistication to this rollover, or to any rollover, then you don't do it on the hover, you do it on the original element. But you say transition, and what we want to transition is the background color. So we transition the background color at like 200 milliseconds, and then ease means ease in and out, so it's just a shorthand for it. And you can see now that there's it's a nice little animated type of effect, so it just gives a little bit more elegance, a little bit more sophistication to what you're doing. It makes it look like these things are not just links on a page, but they're part of an application, which is a nice touch whenever you see it. And so all of our buttons will have this nice transition. Okay, so that's pretty good for just these regular read more buttons. And I want this button to be a little bit bolder, a little bit different, and then I've also tagged it as a ghost button. Okay, so it has all the regular button properties, but we're also going to make it a ghost button. So I'm just going to come up here underneath our regular button styles, and I'll add ghost button. And I wanted to take on some of the different properties that our regular button has, but I also want to give it some different ones. So we're going to say background is transparent, and then we're going to say border of 3 pixels, solid, and then our original gray color. So it's got a nice thick border. And then we're going to say the color is also that nice gray color. I really think it should be uppercase. So we do text transform, and that makes the words uppercase. And then we'll also do the font weight of bold. So bold is normally 600, 700, 900, something like that, whatever your font allows for. Okay, and now you can see when we roll over it, we still get the same effect that we have here, which is not exactly what we want. What I want is for this dark color to be in the background, and then for the words to become white. So let's do the hover effect for this. And so we want to say background of the dark color, and then we want to say the color is white, and that should get us pretty far. Yeah. But one of the things that we run into is up here, we're only transitioning the background color. So you see the background color transitions nicely, but the color of the text doesn't transition very nicely. So two things you can do. You can either say, instead of background color, you could say all, and then that will transition everything nicely. Or you can, the problem with that is it's listening for every single possible change. Okay, so that's performance-wise, it's not the best thing to do. Performance-wise, the best thing to do is to only choose whichever thing that you want, whichever property that you want to listen for. So on this button, we're only listening for the background color change because that's what is part of our button hover, right? But on this one, we are listening for the background change and the color change. So we will bring our transition down, and then you can actually add multiple transitions to a particular element. So we're going to say color. Same thing, 200 milliseconds, ease in and out, and then let's save that just to see if it's going to come along or not. You might have to just trust me on this one. It's working, but it's not as smooth as I think it's going to be whenever it kicks in. It should be smooth like that, except everything should be transitioning smoothly. In the meantime, let us move on to, we want to center this button, and also want to give it some margin so that we get it away from all these articles. So it's called the what? It's called the oh, we didn't give it a name. So let's call it the blog CTA. How about that? So we're going to come down and we're going to say blog CTA. And we're going to just give it some margin of, I don't know, 3 rem on the top. It doesn't necessarily need any margin on the bottom. And then we're also going to say text align of center. And hopefully it'll kick in, and then it'll actually center that. Let's see here. Computer's really working hard in this in this particular video. Let's refresh it and see if it happens the way that I planned. All right. Here we go. Okay, so we got a nice space here, and then I wanted it to make it a ghost button so that it stands out against these other buttons, right? And then you can see also how it transitions. Before we were transitioning only the background slowly, and then the color was changing instantaneously, but now it all moves together as if it were one animation. You see that? One other thing I want to do is I want to make this a little bit more prominent, so I'm just going to say font size of, boy, I don't know, 1.5 rem, something that might be too big. I'm not sure. Well, let's see. It's taking quite a bit of time here to update with the live updates. But you can see this section has a nice, when I put it up on the full screen, you can see that it has a nice, a lot of white space, right? So it makes it super easy to tell which of these sections is which and what the read more goes with. So that's a nice little addition there of the blog page. I suppose we could set this to something a little more outrageous. Maybe we're setting it on the wrong thing. Let's say okay, so now we're setting it on the A tag instead of just the div, and that's quite a bit different. So let's set it to 1.5 and let's see if maybe that's a little bit better. Still seems big. Let's do that, and then let's do padding on here of 1 rem all the way around. So you remember it was 0.5 on the top and bottom here, and only 1 on the, and then 1 on the side. But if we do our padding for the ghost button, I'm sorry, I should have done it on the ghost button. If we put some padding here of 1 rem, then it should add a little bit more to the top and bottom and kind of set this ghost button apart a little bit. Make it just a bit more prominent. Let's see if that'll work. Yeah, okay, so you're seeing it over here in this live view. So you can see that the padding is a little bit bigger on top and bottom than up here. So we have a nice padding on the side, but it was a little bit short on the top and bottom just to make a smaller, more manageable button. But this one, we really want to be able to just hit it. I mean, it's a single button, it's right in the middle. We want it to be a nice call to action. So you can see as you come down, there's a nice call to action there, right? I like that. I like the button there. What else do we have for this section? That looks like it. It looks like we've created everything that we needed to. And when you look at this, you can see that it's centered in the middle. It lines up with this section up here, so it provides a nice contrast with this section here, but it also provides some continuity with this particular layout up here. And instead of the vertical 3 across, you get this nice horizontal 3 across, which is it's a little bit of a change of pace, but you're still getting kind of the groups of 3. And then, like I said, we'll work on the mobile styles on this a little bit later in another video. So that is a nice little killer blog section, and then you would click these and then it would go to a different story. You could also, you could add a headline up here. You could add a byline, so if there's a headline and then who wrote the story, or if you wanted to do the traditional blog pattern with tags or categories or what date it was published, that type of thing, you could always add those in as some sort of metadata here as well. And then you would just add that into this blog text section. So you just put it somewhere down in here. So that is how to build the blog section of our website. And thanks for watching. Thank you for making it this far in this series. I'm really glad so many people have been helped by watching some of the grid videos that I've done. I really appreciate you subscribing, and would really appreciate it if you just shared with your social network any videos that have been helpful to you, or something that's helped you in your journey as a coder. I have lots of other videos on my channel if you want to subscribe and go back and look at some of those videos from basic to a little bit more advanced. And yeah, I'll continue out this series. In the next video, we're going to talk about the footer and how to build out this nice footer section down here. And then essentially our website is going to be finished except for the mobile styles, and then we'll go back in the final video and we'll just kind of shore it up and make it a little bit more polished than what it is right now. It feels a little bit unpolished to me. It needs something, it needs some more things. So we just have to kind of look at what we can do to jazz it up a little bit and make it feel like it's been designed, as opposed to just kind of put together and CSS layouted, but something a little bit more designy. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.